Good afternoon, brother.
Buenas tardes. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So, just like to start off, if you can, just give us your name and tell us a little bit about what you do in community.
My name is Ismael Lopez, also known by Shutekpa or Smiley in the community. I'm been a community organizer for about 15 years, working around immigration reform, working with farm workers and workers' rights in general. So just organizing community and doing that type of work. Yeah.
So, we've known each other for a while, but recently you told me about some work that you're doing with the proposed Office of Equity. Can you kind of tell us what the origins of this work is?
Yeah, last legislative session, I think it was Senator McGregor tried to pass legislation to get an Office of Equity in the state of Washington. A lot of different health organizations, different organizations around the state have equity offices, but there's not one for the state. They could maybe provide oversight or other things like that. So they tried to pass it in the last legislative session. They were not able to secure the votes to pass it, but what they were able to provide was a proviso. And in the proviso, they were able to get a little bit of funding to hire some people. And part of the people that were hired was yours truly. So basically, that's how this work started to unfold.
All right. And so, what is your role and the other organizers' role in the actual development of the office?
Well, I would say I'm pretty much the organ. I'm doing the majority of the organizing around this Office of Equity, and my role is to. Well, let me take a step back. One of the things that they talked about when they were talking about doing this work of an Office of Equity, having it being centered in community and having the community's voice being centered in the work. So if we're talking about equity, then we have to bring in voices of color. We have to bring in communities of color. We got to bring in hyper marginalized communities, indigenous communities. We got to bring all our people from the margins to the center. So that's my work. My work is I go out to communities that have historically been marginalized, communities where there isn't a lot of apathy for government, a lot of apathy for the whole process, right, of receiving justice, right? So I go out and I talk with the communities. I gather information. I gather stories. I listen. I try to, I guess, my work is two-pronged. I guess the first one I would say is listening to the community and seeing what are the issues going on in this community, and do I know anybody, or is there anybody that I could connect them with to get help, immediate help for their situation, for any of their situation, or is there anybody that they should talk to? And hey, have you all been connected to this community? You should talk because you have similar interests, and maybe you guys could leverage your support and come up with something to benefit both your communities. So that's part one of what I do. And then the other part is trying to bring their voices to the table, trying to bring them to the table so that the people who are a part of this task force, the board, can hear their stories, can see their faces, can imagine themselves in this position, and be able to make the recommendations to the legislators on behalf of these communities.
Question: would this Office of Equity be dealing primarily with oversight of health organizations within the state, or would that expand to criminal justice and other types of issues?
So that's a real good question, and that kind of goes back to the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So part of the work that I'm doing is saying, going to communities and asking them, what functions would you like the Office of Equity to have? What functions would you like them to be a part of? How many, in what areas of your day-to-day life could the Office of Equity help, impact or alleviate some of the things that are going on And so just getting feedback, because if we're talking about an office of equity, I mean, equity is something that could be used all across the board, from whether we're talking about health, whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking about employment, whether we're talking about scholarships, whether we're talking, I mean, it's a huge umbrella. And so the idea is to get the ball rolling, to figure out what are the priorities for the community, and how do we build this thing out to really provide response to the community.
So what kind of feedback have you been getting from the groups that you have talked to, and the group that I'll be sharing this with is the Healthy King County Coalition?
Right.
What kind of information would be most helpful to hear from us, which is basically a group of people who work in health?
Well, I think some of the feedback that I've been getting is people concerned, right? They're concerned about how this office could possibly benefit them. You know, a lot of times people, one of the things I've been hearing, like, it's hard for me to think about, you know, an office of equity when I'm facing, when I'm having to find another place to live because I can't afford my rent, right? i.e. gentrification. So then how do I take the language that people are using as far as talking about gentrification and put it under an equity lens, right? So now we're talking about affordable rents. Now we're talking about, you know, rent control. We're talking about how do we look at communities and make sure that there's space for low income people, that there's space for different types of people, multifamily living spaces, because culturally that's appropriate for some of our people, right? So I think it's taking some of those responses and putting it under the equity lens and working with the people to come up with the understanding together, right? Like I don't have the understanding, and maybe some of the things that I'm talking about they don't get right off the bat. So how can we use dialogue and communication and trust to really come up with an understanding about those things? And so I guess if I would answer the question about what I could get from feedback from the people that are here and that are listening, and thank you all for what you do. You know, I know that this is a community where there's a lot of care, and a lot of the people doing this work don't get a lot of gratitude. And so I just want to, you know, preface the statement with that and say that the feedback is like, what specific things could an Office of Equity do to make sure that there's better responses to the needs of the people in healthcare, right? So one of the things that has been an issue is you know, some kids that were a part of the DREAM Act, right? They were able to get healthcare for a while. Now it's kind of like up in the air whether they're gonna get healthcare or not. And then when we tie in the public charge, the things that the president's talking about, it gets to be a very convoluted conversation, right? And it's something that myself working on this office, I have a little bit of understanding, but the people here are going to be the experts. So what could y'all tell me about how an Office of Equity could better serve you in your position and the things that you're doing? And I guess one of the things that I got feedback from the community as well is how can we have a direct connection to this office, right? How can we report things or get information directly to these people without a bunch of buffers, right? That way we can respond in real time. And so these are the things that we're looking at. These are the things that we want to imagine this like in the best scenario possible, so that when we take it into legislation, you know, we could walk away with something meaningful, because, you know, oftentimes there's a lot of give and take. So if we go in there, I believe that if we go in there with a really robust ask, then we could walk away with a nice skeleton that we could then build out through time. But this is all contingent on community support and grassroots support and a base support, something that the government is not used to drumming up, right? They're used to, we make the law, we do this, and then that's it, right? But we're trying to use a different matrix, right? We're trying to use a different way of modus operandi, right? So we could get people, the base, excited about this and bring in something that they'll stand up and they'll fight for it, right? So that's kind of the only way we get things a lot of time is hustling and pushing for it and grinding and coming together. Most importantly, coming together as a community in solidarity across health, across education, across all these different ways. So yeah, that's kind of like specifically what is going on. How could we help? What are the things that, are there stories that you could share with me? If there's stories, that's, those are priceless, right? Because one story is worth, more than a lot of, numbers that you're going to throw at me or at people. So I think that, making it real for people is definitely going to be helpful. So, yeah.
So I'm obviously going to share this information that people respond back with you. But is there a way that people can contact you directly, if they would like to reach out with an email or even possibly call you?
Yeah, so definitely. So it's Ismael, ESMAEL.Lopez at SBOH.wa.gov. Or they can call me at 360-789-6082. And then I'm going to hook you up with all my information, my contact information. Anybody who wants to get a hold of me, please give me a call, send me an email. I try to be super responsive. If there's things that, events going on, things I should know about, things that y'all know about that I don't know about, I just want to make myself available, even if it's just to listen to your story or hear you out. I think that we have to make time for these things, and we have to do things the right way. And so this has been something that I've been struggling to get people to understand along the way, is that we cannot work for the short-term gain. We can't say, let's go to communities, let's mine them for information, get all the stuff and the stories and all the things that we need so we can pass this legislation and then move on. No. Let's build meaningful relationships. Let's build sacred relationships with people that I can look at you and say, brother, you could look at me the same. That that when you need something that has nothing to do with this office, that you can count on me as an ally. Those are the types of relationships that I want to encourage people to build, because we need that type of relationship if we're going to change the way we do things, right? So, yeah.
One final question, and that is, I know you're doing a lot of work. What are some of the other projects that you're currently working on in the community?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I'm working on the state level as well is the Environmental Justice Task Force. So we're trying to get Environmental Justice Task Force off the ground right now. So basically, we tried to pass the HEAL Act last legislative session to put in some to pressure around climate change, to pressure around environmental justice, right? And so what we want to do, there's a health equity tool that I'm probably pretty sure most of you have heard of. And so we want to get feedback on that. How could we make it better? How could we disaggregate more the information so when people, click on the map, that they get more information, and they could get information piled on top of information, right? So I've been looking at the things they're doing in California, super high tech, interesting stuff. So we're going to be going around the state doing listening sessions, trying to get people involved. I think environmental justice is huge for health as well, because there's so many people that are getting sick just because of where they live or where they work. My family worked in the field, so we have, a huge, we lost a lot of family due to these, the sacrifice people make for fresh fruit, the way that our workers are excluded from a lot of the protections in the state. So this is equity and it's environmental justice. So that's why these two things, they're kind of going hand in hand, but we're really trying to push this and really trying to get people involved. So if people want to get involved with environmental justice, you could reach me as well, and we could talk about that and see what that looks like. And always dealing with a lot of different things, in the community. I got my hand in it, I got my ear on it, and I'm trying to, see how we can bring people together, communities of color together to, to start addressing some of the issues that our communities are facing.
Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Mateo.